and Laban. And heaven help those two.
Yeah.
They deserved each other in many ways and got themselves caught in each other's shenanigans all through it. Having gotten to Jacob's Ladder, how many of you know the old little gospel chorus, "We are climbing Jacob's ladder"?
We've done it before, long time ago.
That's camp music.
Yeah. I went to seminary during the feminist crisis in the church, and a wonderful woman had written a new song to it called "We Are Dancing Sarah's Circle." So we were not climbing. I've always felt that there was something wrong with that chorus, because as I read the story, Jacob didn't do any climbing. The angels came down and ministered to him rather than him climbing the ladder. And I've always felt that we have theologically gotten ourselves in a bind because we've been so busy trying to climb to God, when actually God's been coming down to us and looking for us. At least in my theology, that's the way I read it, that God, the hounds of hell have not been after us, God has been. And God has been following us, trying to catch us as we run away. So, I think Jacob has gotten us into a bad place, making us think that we have to struggle to reach God. I remember when I was, in my 20s, and my father and I have never had a really great relationship. And if you've been following me on Facebook, you know that. And I had this series of dreams where I was on this tall staircase, or it'd start with me reaching for something in the closet, and then I'd find myself on a staircase climbing up, trying to reach a little red light at the top of the staircase. And it kept receding as I climbed. And through the offices of a marvelous psychiatrist, I suddenly realized I was trying to get my father's approval, which I was never going to get. And rather than keep struggling up Jacob's ladder, I needed to get the heck off that thing. So the Jacob's ladder for me has always been rather formative in my theology. So please understand when I say we have misread that story. If you want to read it, let's open to Genesis 28. Okay, Genesis 28, beginning at verse 10. And somebody over here start us off.
Jacob left Beersheba and went toward Haran. He came to a certain place and stayed there for the night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place. And he dreamed that there was a ladder set upon the earth, the top of it reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And the Lord stood beside him and said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and to your offspring, and your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth. And you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. And all the families of the earth shall be blessed in you and your offspring. Know that I am with you and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave you until I have done what I promised you. Then Jacob woke from his sleep and said, Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven.
He called it what?
Bethel.
Bethel. And for those of you who've been through Bethel with me, this is where I got it. And this has been a very important.
We sang those very words Sunday.
Did you?
Surely the Lord is in this
Oh,
place.
yes, of course. Yes. And you sang it very well.
We weren't fishing
You
for
kind of
content.
got that, didn't you?
Yeah.
We were fishing for content.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I want to say that this is an Elohist or a priestly part. Because go on from there. Somebody read from there to the end of the chapter, and you'll see why I say probably this comes from the priestly tradition. Phil, how about you taking up?
So Jacob rose early in the morning, and he took the stone that he had put under his head and set it up for a pillar and poured on the top of it. He called that place Bethel, but the name of the city was Luz at first. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, If God will be with me and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God. And this stone which I have set up for a pillar shall be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will surely give 1/10 to you.
What have we established?
Tithing.
The tithe. So this is why I say this has to come from the priestly tradition, where he sets up, oh, this is how the tithe started. Do you know actually how the tithe came to be? A quorum in the Jewish tradition has to be 10 families, 10 men, 10 families. Each of them gives 10% of their income so that the rabbi can live at the same standard as the congregation. And then the rabbi gives his tenth to the poor. And that is really the foundation of the tithe. Makes awfully good sense. If we all give, hello pastor, the pastor can, having been one, the pastor can live at the same level with the congregation. And it should be that way. Okay. Okay. Marriage. By the way, Jersey just passed gay marriage. Yes.
In Illinois City.
And 30 Methodist ministers in Pennsylvania are going to perform gay marriage. And honey, if you could fire all 30 of them, you're going to have a hard time. So forgive me for being on the side of free marriage. But okay, marriage. Women in the patriarchal period belonged to a man. She belonged to her father. She belonged to her husband. If her husband died, she belonged to her son. And if she had none of them, she belonged to her brother. She was not an independent entity unto herself. She always was the property of some man, which is why Ruth is such an important piece of scripture, because she didn't belong to a man. She didn't have one to belong to. But women were the property of some man. And marriages were arranged. They were arranged politically. They were arranged financially. They were arranged to bring two important houses together. They were not love matches. One did not get married for love in those days, which is why the story of Jacob and Rachel is sort of interesting and strange, because he fell in love with the woman who watered his father's camels. It's interesting that they had camels. Do you remember the map?
Which map?
The Fertile Crescent map. If you can bring up the Fertile Crescent map.
All the circles on it. One next
No,
to it,
that's not the good one. But anyway,
It's directly next
we
to
have
it.
one in better color, Missy.
Oh, is that one?
Yeah, with the...
There it is.
Yeah, there it is. Okay, if you look at the Fertile Crescent, he is going from Haran, which is at the northern part of the thin strip, and going over into Mesopotamia. What's the quickest way to get there? He has to cross the desert. You're not going to take camels through the green part, but you're sure going to take camels through the desert. So if, what's his name is, I can't remember his name. Anyway, if,
Are we talking about Isaac or Laban?
no, the
Jacob?
steward.
Yeah.
If the steward is going across the desert, he has to have camels. So that's a bit of information that they don't give you, but it has to be, because you're not going to, parade camels through Mesopotamia. So,
Well, that would have been obvious to anybody then.
huh?
I said that would have been obvious to the original readers.
Oh, of course, they would have known that immediately. But they weren't camel traders, as I've said at some point. They were donkey traders. So for camels to suddenly appear has to mean something. And so they have come across the desert. Compared to other cultures of the time, women, Israelite, I'm going to have to use that term, although it's too early to call them Israelites, but Israelite women were not sheltered. They weren't independent, but they weren't sheltered. They traveled, they visited, they weren't in the harem, they were, pretty independent. They worked on the farm, they worked as shepherds, they had jobs. And later on, if you read Proverbs 31, you will see all the things that Israelite women did. They raised grapes, they did, made wine, pressed oil, they did all kinds of work. So they were not bought exactly into a marriage, but there was a person who contracted marriages, and he was called a mohar. And don't mix that up with a mohel, because a mohel performs circumcisions.
Yeah, you just might want to mix that up.
Dangerous difference.
That's not exactly the same thing.
Question.
But the mohar arranged the bride price. And we talked about the little circlet of coins that women wore, which was her bride money, her dowry money. Rachel and Leah complained that their father devoured their bride price. Laban misused that money, because that money, in the case of emergency, was supposed to come back to them. To get back at their father, they steal the family gods. Okay? Because he can't operate without the family gods. I mean, Laban is not a believer. Okay? Jacob and Laban establish a shepherd's contract. The Code of Hammurabi, 600 to about 610 of the Code of Hammurabi spells out a shepherd's contract. I mean, it's there in, there it is, okay? The contract really sets out exactly what is in a shepherd's contract. And you see...
Kind of hard to read, but...
Somebody want to read it? Because I can't see it over my...
No, you're not, it's just your notes, but that picture, which is kind of hard to see in this light, all right in here is the code, just in cuneiform, just all the way around that pole.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's on a steel, which is like an obsidian pillar carved into it with...
It's the complete thing, too. You can actually, they actually got it printed out. You can go read it online, look at the whole thing.
Yeah, I have it in a magazine, and I should have taken a picture of it. Anyway, Jesus will speak to this, actually, when he says that I am the door of the sheepfold, and talks about how he protects his people, or how he protects his sheep. And this, can you imagine this from probably 4000 BC up to the time of Jesus, never changed. Never changed. This was the way shepherds, contract shepherds, lived. And the shepherds out in the fields, with Christmas coming up before we know it, those shepherds were probably shepherds who kept the sheep that were sacrificed in the temple. The absolutely blemishless sheep that were sacrificed were raised according to this code, and those shepherds behaved accordingly. So the shepherd has a long tradition among the Jewish people, and Ezekiel will talk about good shepherds and bad shepherds, meaning good kings and bad kings, as to how they shepherd their people. Jacob contracted for 7 years, at the end of which he would get Rachel. Oh no, Laban had another plan. And so on the wedding night, in the dark, with a veil on, he sends Leah in. And just as we have the legal contract that was part of Jacob and Esau, and if he had not consummated the marriage, he would not have been in trouble, but he did. And so he had to buy Leah because he had already benefited. And so he buys Leah. And then he becomes very upset, as I'm sure anyone would, and Laban makes him another contract. 7 more years. Only this time he will indeed get Rachel. But he will get Rachel right away. He doesn't have to wait 7 years. So now he has 2 wives.
I'll bet the lamp went with him that night.
Huh?
I'll bet the lamp went with him that night.
I would not. Okay. 7 more years, and he has contracted, and as I said, 7, what does 7 mean? Completion. We don't know if it was really 7 years, but he completed his contract. Okay. Jacob decides that he's going to get Laban. He's going to make Laban pay for his shenanigans. He says, okay, I will work for you all these years, providing, and we can read that. Genesis 30, let me find out which verse. Oh, okay. Look at verse 29 and start reading there, and let's get, Jane, how about you?
Jacob replied, "You know how hard I've worked for you and how your flocks and herds have grown under my care. You had little indeed before I came, but your wealth has increased enormously. The Lord has blessed you, though, through everything I've done. But now, what about me? When can I start providing for my own family?" "What wages do you want?" Laban asked again. Jacob replied, "Don't give me anything, just do this one thing, and I'll continue to tend and watch over your flocks. Let me inspect your flocks today and remove all the sheep and goats that are speckled or spotted, along with all the black sheep. Give these to me as my wages. In the future, when you check on the animals you've given me as my wages, you'll see that I've been honest. If you find in my flock any goats without speckles or spots, or any sheep that are not black, you will know that I have stolen them from you."
Go ahead.
"All right," Laban replied, "it'll be as you say." But that very day Laban went out and removed the male goats that were streaked and spotted, all the female goats that were speckled and spotted or had white patches, and all the black sheep. He placed them in the care of his own sons, who took them a 3 days' journey from where Jacob was. Meanwhile, Jacob stayed and cared for the rest of Laban's flock.
Okay, somebody, Tommy, you want to pick it up there?
I can. Then Jacob took fresh rods of poplar and almond and plane, and peeled white streaks in them, exposing the white of the rods. He set the rods that he had peeled in front of the flocks in the troughs, that is, the watering places, where the flocks came to drink. And since they bred when they came to drink, the flocks bred in front of the rods. And so the flocks produced young that were striped, speckled, and spotted. Jacob separated the lambs and set the faces of the flocks toward the striped and the completely black animals in the flock of Laban. And he put his own droves apart, and did not put them with Laban's flock. Whenever the stronger of the flock were breeding, Jacob laid the rods in the troughs before the eyes of the flock. Then they might breed among the rods. But for the feebler of the flock, he did not lay them there, so the feebler were Laban's and the stronger Jacob's.
Go ahead.
Thus the man grew exceedingly rich and had large flocks and male and female slaves and camels and donkeys.
Okay, selective breeding. I don't think the rods had anything to do with it. I think he bred stronger animals. Okay, so he gets Laban back by selectively breeding the best cattle. Of course, he says they're only the striped and the spotted and the black, but he does a good job of, breeding the right sheep. Laban does not like this idea, and we're going to change batteries